you're never going to keep every person from clicking on the wrong thing. You're never going to keep every malware file out there out of your system. And so if you set yourself up for a cybersecurity goal that has to be perfect, you are destined to fail. And companies now are to the point where they cannot afford to fail. One cyber failure will completely destroy a company in this day and age. So they need to get past that. They need a goal that they can get behind. And I advocate the concept of cyber resiliency to replace cybersecurity as that top corporate goal. Cyber resiliency says, no matter what, we'll keep spitting out widgets. No matter what, we'll do what we're in business to do or what we're chartered to do. We'll be able to keep doing it. Even if malware gets in or an employee clicks on the wrong thing, or now all your employees are having to work from home on their home Wi-Fi that's filled with, if you're like me, filled with all sorts of horrible things that you never would connect to your office network. Resiliency has to understand that. You need a plan. You need an architecture. You need a concept of operations for resiliency that says bad stuff will happen. And darn it, it will not take us down. We will be able to minimize it. We will be able to quickly recover from it. We will be able to insure against it. But no matter what happens, we will be fine. We will keep doing what we do. And that is a goal that we can win together. And it certainly requires the greatest talent and capabilities out of the cybersecurity world. But if the goal is resilience, that's a goal that can be won. And that's what I advocate very strongly now with the Unisys clients, with Unisys itself. We've adopted a resilience platform here that allowed us to switch into pandemic mode, very rapidly. In less than 3 days, we moved our workforce from almost 80% on-site to 92% work from home in just a few days, without deploying VPNs, without doing all this, because we were already in this resilient mode. So the pandemic, the move to ESG, the new technologies that are available have allowed organizations to really start thinking about resilience as the top goal. And that's what I talk a lot about with boards. I talk about a lot of that with CEOs, not the security folks to start with, but let's just talk about what they want as a goal. And when you get them past, keeping the server spinning as the top goal and make it to keep the widgets going out, then it becomes a much more interesting and positive, winnable discussion.
Well, I think you just outlined an entire strategy right there in the last probably couple of minutes, right? And that couldn't have been done without practice. So how much do you think does practice go into it versus just the smarts of Tom Patterson?
Well, this is something that a lot of people are getting behind now, Val, and you and I both know a lot of the same people in common that where resilience is really being talked about. I think 2020 is a year that it's gaining steam. I don't think we're there yet, but I'm actually looking forward to it being one of the ways companies choose to help them emerge stronger coming through this. So I think we're getting there. It's still very early days. It's something that can be read a lot about. There's great books on this. There's great researchers on this and papers. But mostly I spend my time, again, Unisys affords me this wonderful job as their chief trust officer, and a lot of time talking with our stakeholders at the very top levels. And so I hear what's important to them. And again, very rarely do they say, oh, I'm worried that my PC's running too slowly, which used to be the question we would get all the time from a board member. Now it's very much, how do we grow through this? How do we facilitate this new environment? And I think those are the kind of conversations, the more we talk to each other, the more we work each other, when we work in forums like the CFF, really beat the heck out of some of these questions. They're not all straightforward and easy. But for me, working through the Moonshot program at the White House, spent a year being briefed by the best and brightest in the world on every aspect of how we can make the internet safe and secure within a decade. And, I learned a tremendous amount from them. I kept my ears open and my mouth shut and took a lot of notes. But we spent a year, getting briefed, and we spent another year sort of synthesizing what they taught us and putting that into a plan. Anybody's welcome to go download it. It's somewhere on the White House site. It's somewhere on the DHS site, but I made a pointer to it at unisys.com/moonshot. Download the report. It's unclassified. It's available around the world. The concept is that the U.S. wasn't going to tell the rest of the world how to do it. but we were going to try and lead by example, and this is what we're going to do. So we didn't, by definition, tell anybody you should do this, but we also didn't hide what we're planning to do as a nation around the 6 different pillars, and really come together so that by the end of this decade, we are operating in a safe and secure internet at least for our critical infrastructure and core operations for a nation.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that you just outlined is the critical infrastructure piece with respect to sharing it and building frameworks and sharing it with the world, right? And this is probably very timely as within CFF and within the community, as we are expanding to our programs around the world, we have been approached by different countries who have been looking to build a similar public-private partnership to have their own resilience, so that this is a very global connected world, and each part has to be as resilient. Otherwise, we have all we need is one weak link to break this all together.
Right, and we saw that in the beginnings of the shutdowns for the pandemic, for the COVID. It suddenly, it's what's important now. It's important is toilet paper and paper towels and hand sanitizer and things that suddenly that was disrupted in the flow. That's now allowed companies to start thinking, oh, well, what's important on my ecosystem? How do I ensure trust in that ecosystem? Last year in the fall at Auburn University, I helped host something called the National Cyber Moonshots Trusted Ecosystem Workshop, where we had representatives from 100 different organizations come together to debate what could be done. We all know the problems. Oh, well, we can't trust this country, but they make lots of the good, cheap gear, and it's widely used. We can't do this, we can't do that. We instead flipped the question around, and we spent 2 days with the best and brightest trying to come up with solutions that we could do. And it turns out in areas like 5G, where collectively there's going to be trillions of dollars spent to deploy 5G around the world over the coming few years. And then everybody's going to have it. It's going to have all these great capabilities. So you and I can, have a network directly between the two of us without going through some third party. All these changes, almost zero latency, which fixes connected cars issues as you're driving down the roads. All that's coming. All this money is going to be spent. What if we could corral that energy and that effort to make sure it's spent in a way that makes it actually safer and more secure? And it turns out, if you start to use things like new technologies like quantum key management, artificial intelligence, you can overcome some of the low trust issues with low-cost third-party providers that are in countries that might be disrupted. You can plan for resilience by having multiple sources where you don't sacrifice your security. There's lots of ways, it turns out, you can build a trusted ecosystem. And I'm thrilled to see the beginnings of that happening in the US. And I believe it's possible to happen all over the world, where figure out who you trust and figure out where you have your sources of supply, and then find ways to use technology to overcome the weaknesses. And that's what the Moonshots Trusted Ecosystem Workshop discovered and has out, as a plan put forth. But there's also all these other great technologies. I'm so excited about what's happening in using AI for good. I'm so excited about the breakthroughs in identity standardization, so we can finally get past the passwords and start to make use of behavioral biometrics and all these sensors that are coming online. And I know quantum is kind of a scary word, and some people think it's just Star Wars and way out there. I believe it's on our horizon. It's in certainly my moonshot event horizon of this decade. And so I'm wildly excited about the breakthroughs in quantum communications, quantum cloud, quantum key management, quantum key distribution. All these things now that were just a decade ago fantasy are now operational and work, but they're going to be out there and providing solutions. We just need to wake up and start trying to solve this year's problems with this year's technologies.
Well, I mean, that isn't that fascinating that earlier we used to be probably proficient, or at least have working knowledge on one or two topics. Now it's so connected. As a business leader, you cannot ignore technology. As a technology leader, you cannot ignore the security or the trust or the risk that everything carries. And each of these topics are very deep, exciting that ends themselves, right? 5G as it's connected to the quantum, and quantum as it's connected to the AI, and the whole cryptographic ecosystem that we have with PKI. So very, very exciting. I think, it's like, for young people, I think it's like being kid in a candy land. You have to, you pick one, and then expand your horizon, and see how you can piece them together. I think it is just an amazing time to be in the technology world and being an entrepreneur. So that brings us to one of the other topics that Tom, you and I have spoken about previously, is about the as we understand, tech for good is picking up, right? There's a humongous kind of market, and it's become really commercial. Tech for good has become really commercial. How about cyber for good? And where do you see, with your involvement in the Cyber Peace Institute and other organizations like East West and all the places that you spend time in, what's your take on cyber for good?
Listen, I'm known as the guy in the room that's optimistic. I've had
Can't debate that. Yeah.
my whole life. I've worked and lived in some of the ugliest places in history of the planet, and I'm still optimistic. I see the ugliness. I'm no Pollyanna. But I also look and find and see the goodness and the opportunity. And you hit it just the nail on the head, Val. This is a great time to be a student, to be an emerging graduate. There's so much. It's like the wheel's about to be invented, except times 4 or 5. There's so many great areas to get into where if you study the right things in school and take your first couple of jobs where you're actually putting them into practice, you could in your 20s be the most valuable employee of the next generation of companies if you play your cards right. It was hard to say that in the past. In the engineering, the older you are, the more senior you are as an engineer. Even with coding, it's sort of how many years of experience do you have? That's not the case with AI for good. That's not the case with 5G. Nobody's got 10 years of 5G experience. Nobody's got 10 years of quantum, cloud computing experience. But these are all things that are learnable. These are all things now that can be put in practice. It's a wonderfully positive world, and there are lots of great organizations. You mentioned Cyber Peace Institute, and thank you very much for that. A global charitable organization based in Geneva that does good things with cyber. It corrals cyber people, it corrals cyber companies, and said, here's a problem, let's put our capabilities to work. The most recent one that they've started, and I'm proud that Unisys is one of the earliest large-scale global corporate partners for, is called Cyber for Healthcare. They looked at all these healthcare companies that are working either to solve the COVID crisis or at least minimize the horrible pain and suffering from a COVID victim all over the world. It's boundaryless, obviously. They looked at that and said, boy, there's adversaries, there's bad guys taking advantage of them, sending them ransomware so that they have to pay because lives are at stake. That's horrible. And yet some of them are not sophisticated in the ways of cyber. They don't have a great chief security officer. They don't spend a lot of time and money on it because they've never had to. Who would attack a hospital? It's crazy. Or who would attack someone trying to cure the virus? It's crazy. But those things, that's the world we have today, and those bad things happen. So Cyber Peace Institute created Cyber for Healthcare as a volunteer organization for companies like Unisys that have great cybersecurity capabilities, products and services and people and talent and ideas and infrastructure around the world. Said, would you help? Would you volunteer to help a company that comes to us in that space and says, we've got a problem, we've got an issue, or we think we have an issue that we might not be able to save lives here because of cyber attacks. And so the Cyber for Healthcare initiative from the Cyber Peace Institute is something Unisys is thrilled to support. There's all sorts of other great programs everywhere. If you look for them, you'll see greatness in this world, even today. So the East West Institute works on a concept of track to diplomacy, which is my very first job, even while I was still in college, where the concept is out of power groups from different countries that may have conflicts with the current administrations. Out of power people understand that there's back channel ways that they can work together on big global problems, and EWI helps facilitate that. And again, Unisys is is a proud sponsor. I'm thrilled to be an active participant in many of their global programs. So there's a lot going on. I mentioned the National Cyber Moonshot program that's now been adopted at the White House. The Solarium Commission report is now starting to get legs and move forward. I'm thrilled to have been named late last year as a senior fellow at Auburn University's McCrary Institute for Homeland Security, which allows me to work with a whole nother set of people from an academic perspective to try and bring that to bear. We just jointly released an article on the air we breathe inside the buildings. It's completely apolitical, it's nonpartisan. It just, if you're going back and putting people in a building, here's what you need to know. And it's just authoritative. We partnered with the Air Force to do that. So lots of greatness out there. Don't sleep, just learn.
That is right. If you learn how to or just clone yourself and have an AI, I think we'll get to the situation where we have or when we have an AI avatar of ours doing the work that we want to do when we are taking a human.
Honestly, Val, we don't need to wait for that. I think that I hear a lot of my friends talking about, oh, did you binge this show? Did you binge that show? I've never binged a show. I would much rather learn something or talk to somebody or get involved in a discussion or an argument or write a panel, write a paper. Especially I've been writing joint papers now with 2 or 3 other people, all with different perspectives and backgrounds, because you learn as much as you give. And everybody, it's open to everybody. The internet's democratized all this learning. We didn't have a chance to talk about cyber education, but today's a great time. I know you have to learn from home for the time being. That won't last forever, but there's so many opportunities to learn from home. Don't learn yesterday's curriculum. Don't learn how to program COBOL. Learn about 5G security. You can find it online. There's 10 papers to read, and you'll be the smartest kid in the room.
Oh yeah, and you don't have to be you don't have to be just confined to the technology piece of it. Think about the policy. Think about supply chain. Think about the economics of it. Right. I mean, there is so much application of the technology that we live in today. Yeah.
Yeah, the behaviors need to change to be more secure. We need trusted ecosystems. We need to fix cyber education, not just universities, but the 2-year colleges that have so much to give, specialized training. We're working on a program. The Moonshot has a workshop coming up in September 1st and 2nd at Carnegie Mellon, where we're going to bring in about 100 of deep thinkers around cyber education, but not just college professors. We're thinking about how we can use the internet and social media to do peer rating of what skill do you have and what do you know, and match that with companies that need it, and how to pump efforts into the areas of 2-year organizations that are out there, what we need in more trusted people and postgraduates. So all of this stuff is able to be worked on, but I encourage people to keep an optimistic eye, look for the good stuff, focus on good things you can do, and contribute to having everybody in society emerge stronger.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful note. I believe when we speak about this on the right forums, and we're able to spread it beyond our cybersecurity silos to take it to the business, take it to the academia, and have a real multi-stakeholder approach to this, I think it makes a lot more impact. One of the things that I'm always curious is how do we spread the message? Because we have this outlets that are typically available, or I mean it's available to everyone, but are visible and acknowledged by the leaders who are putting time into this. But how do we make it available and spread the awareness within the talent piece, right? Because that's what we are all working towards.
Yeah, it's a great question. We could spend another hour talking just about how we spread the knowledge. But for me, it's working with these different communities of interest. There's a whole lot of them. I try not to spend time with ones that are driven by a particular company's product, and spend time with groups that are really focused on solving a societal problem that I care about, where I think that there's a solution to be had. And talking in groups, again, that as a senior fellow at Auburn, I've been invited to have a much bigger voice to go talk. What you do in Davos every year, gets people's attention. We had the attention of the world's elite, CEOs and politicians listening to us have these debates and discussions while we're there. Working together with organizations like the CFF is something where I think it's a huge return on investment for my time, and Unisys is an investment in being a partner with you guys. So there's good stuff out there. You got to pick what you're going to use, and I love the Hollywood entertainment business, but when you come out of this recession, or not recession, just recession, but the pandemic, and you get back to sort of a normal life, you should be able to look back at this time and say you did more than binged 10 shows,
Oh gosh, yeah.
none of which you like to remember. So let's learn together, let's work together, let's collectively go out and make the civilized world a safer place, a happier place. This is a great time, and no matter where you are in your career, we talked in the Moonshot about K through Gray education. No matter where you are, let's get involved and be part of this. There's something for everybody as we go through this. There's plenty of money being spent just on those 4 technologies alone. So it's all coming. We just need to make sure it doesn't steamroll us and steamroll our privacy, but instead is used to better protect us, add security, add privacy, and make us resilient as a society going forward.
Well, thank you, Tom. I think that is what Tom Patterson optimism is. So we will stick to that. Well, we have time, probably just one question here, and from our good friend Andrea was asking, love to hear your thoughts on how cyber trust and resilience fit with larger picture of organizational resilience and trust. Trust from the top, which is C-suite and the board. I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but care about tying these two together.
Well, no, it's obviously a great question. It's one the questioner has really helped solve it, and Andrea is one of the great thinkers of the world and great writers. I'm going to butcher the name. Gloom to Bloom, I think, is the name of her latest book. Did I get it right? I hope. Sorry if I didn't. But I love the book, and that is going around in C-suites, and that's going around in boardrooms today. And I think one of the ways to do that that's worked well with me, and I've had a lot more impact just since Davos, when I sort of woke to ESG, is to tie those theories, those themes of resilience and trust into the ESG efforts that are being figured out now by so many boardrooms around the world. It doesn't matter what country's governance laws you're under. Everybody's adopting ESG. There's money to be made in ESG. ESG is real. It's valuable for your clients. And so what Andrea talks about in her book is linking cyber to that. What I extrapolate even further is bringing in the concepts of trust and resilience. And so far for me, it's made my job much easier as I go out and sort of Johnny Appleseed the world to try and make it a better place.
That's beautifully put, and I think that's probably a good segue to bring in Andrea on one of our next programs to talk about.
Absolutely,
right? T could be trust or technology. You make a choice. So shout out to Andrea for bringing that on. Well, in today's program, I think we covered a wide range of topics. This could be a long discussion, and I think we could be topical and could spend 1 hour each or a day. But Tom, it's always a pleasure talking to you. And then this is one of the moments when we take our one-on-ones that we have, pretty regular basis to a more broader audience and then get to share our thoughts. So thank you so much for joining us, sharing your views of the unique role that you are in and how it has shaped or is shaping actively the industry and all the contributions that you have made. Thank you very much for having your time and your thoughts with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Val. This, again, CFF is doing something important. We have to look beyond today and look towards a collective future, and that's something you've been such a great leader at, and I'm proud to support, and I really appreciate you bringing me on today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tom. And again, with everyone out there, and for our next programs, I wanted to share that we have some really exciting set of not just sessions, but I would say initiatives coming up, which will result from these discussions. As we mentioned earlier, programs we will formally launch our Tech Tuesdays. We'll use the rest of the 20 minutes that we have at this hour to give and showcase some of the innovative leaders that are out there. But what we are more excited about is our global program. And a lot of our friends have reached out saying that they're not able to join this noon session. So we're expanding to the Thursdays. We'll do alternate Thursdays from August, starting with and this will be executive roundtable sessions of 90 minutes. So starting with August 6th, it will be India. On August 20th, it's going to be Germany. And then you probably know this is coming from the friends that we have around the world. And as we are teeing up for a most likely virtual summit this year in October, I think all this will shape up to a very, very productive session and productive outcomes. So thank you again for joining us in today's edition. We'll see you again next time when we're back here. And thank you, Tom, for making this session happen. Okay. Thank you so much. Cheers. Bye.